All right, get ready because we're about to take a deep dive into the world of Aligoté.
Aligoté.
You might be thinking, Aligoté, is that like Chardonnay's less famous sibling?
Right.
Maybe a little bit. But this grape, I'm telling you, it's got a story way more interesting than just playing second fiddle.
Oh, I completely agree. It's like Aligoté has been hiding in plain sight, just waiting for its time to shine.
Exactly. And to get to the bottom of all this, we've got excerpts from this book all about Aligoté and a bunch of articles. Even, get this, detailed notes on the Aligoté vine itself. Antholography is what that's called if you want to get technical.
Fancy.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll be an Aligoté expert. You'll be dropping Aligoté knowledge bombs, from its ancient roots to its potential to be a real player in the future of wine.
You'll be the Aligoté aficionado at your next wine tasting, for sure.
I love it.
Where do you want to start?
Well, how about with those origin stories? They're surprisingly dramatic for a grape, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
There's this nickname, Plante à Trois, which basically comes from the grape's tendency to produce 3 bunches per shoot. It really paints a picture of this incredibly abundant, almost mythical grape.
Right. And then there's that whole story about Aligoté being discovered in the Côte d'Or, like, some hidden treasure. But of course, we know now that in reality, its origins are a little more down to earth.
Right. Science tells us that Aligoté is a natural cross between Pinot Noir and Gouais Blanc, which, when you think about it, is pretty cool. I mean, these parent grapes are like, what, royalty in Burgundy?
Yeah.
So Aligoté's got some serious pedigree.
It's true, and knowing that parentage, I think it gives us a clue about why Aligoté thrives in Burgundy. But it's not just a historical thing. The interesting part is that despite Chardonnay's rise to fame, Aligoté never really disappeared.
Hold on, are you saying that dedicated growers kept Aligoté alive while everybody else was busy obsessing over Chardonnay?
Exactly.
Right.
Well, there were these pockets of winemakers, right, who saw something in Aligoté. They recognized its potential, for quality and this really unique ability to reflect the terroir. And that actually brings us to, I think, what's fueling Aligoté's comeback today.
So it's not just a fad. People are, genuinely starting to appreciate Aligoté for what it is. I have to admit, you've got me intrigued.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't about nostalgia. Aligoté has these inherent qualities that are perfectly aligned with what a lot of wine drinkers today are looking for. Freshness, vibrancy, a connection to the place it's grown.
Okay, I'm sold. Tell me more about the grape itself. What makes it so special?
Well, for starters, it's a tough one. Aligoté ripens early, and it's not too picky about where it grows. Actually, it even seems to prefer limestone soils, which are known for, producing fantastic wines.
All right, now let's get down to brass tacks. We've got these amplography notes. I'm curious to know what they say about the Aligoté vine. Don't hold back. Give me all the juicy details.
Okay, get ready for some botanical fun. Aligoté vines has, let's see, medium-sized leaves, compact bunches of grapes, and the berries themselves are small, round, and kind of a greenish-yellow color.
So not the most glamorous looking grape. But hey, it's what's on the inside that counts, right?
Exactly, and those, less than showy looks are part of what makes Aligoté so cool, I think. Aligoté has a short growing cycle. It can be harvested, relatively quickly. Plus, it can handle a bit of stress. It's known to be resistant to drought and disease. And, that's kind of a big deal in the world of grape growing these days.
Now that you mention it, I've heard climate change is making things harder for winemakers. So a grape that can, roll with the punches, that's a good thing to have on your side.
Yeah, Aligoté's hardiness makes it incredibly appealing for growers, especially those who are thinking ahead to the future where sustainability and adaptability are key.
Okay, so we've got this tough, adaptable grape with this, really long history. Now for the big question. What does it actually taste like? What kind of wine does Aligoté make?
Well, get ready for some refreshment because the defining thing about Aligoté wines is their high acidity.
High acidity. So does that mean it'll taste sour?
No, 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 not at all. Think biting into a crisp green apple or, sipping lemonade on a scorching hot day. That's the kind of vibrant, lively energy that Aligoté brings.
All right, that sounds pretty good, actually, especially as we head into warmer weather. What else can we expect in terms of flavor?
Usually those citrus notes we talked about, lemon, green apple, often you get these subtle floral hints and a really nice minerality that ties back to that terroir we were talking about.
Interesting. So we've got this, zesty, citrusy thing going on. But is that all? Does Aligoté have any potential for, complexity? Could it be aged? Could it be fancy?
Oh, absolutely. Don't let that fresh, easy drinking style fool you. Aligoté can get pretty complex, especially with a little oak aging. That's where you start to see those toasty, spicy notes. Adds another dimension.
So Aligoté can be both a casual, everyday sipper and a fancy pants wine worthy of cellaring. Color me impressed.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so exciting, right? It can be a wine for any occasion, from, picnics to a super fancy dinner party.
I'm sold. But I have to know, where are these Aligoté wines being made? Is it just Burgundy, or is this grape, like, going global?
Well, Burgundy's definitely the home of Aligoté, but like any good adventurer, this grape is not afraid to, explore a bit.
Spell it. Where is Aligoté making a splash internationally?
Okay, so believe it or not, Aligoté has found a home in Eastern Europe.
Really?
Yeah, Moldova and Ukraine specifically have really taken to this grape. They're using it to make still wines, sparkling wines, you name it.
Eastern Europe, huh? I wouldn't have guessed that. What's the deal there?
Well, it's fascinating, right? Aligoté's adaptability is a big part of it. Remember how we talked about it being a tough grape, handling different climates and soils?
Yeah. I'm starting to think Aligoté is like the Bear Grylls of grapes, surviving and thriving no matter where it lands.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And just like Bear Grylls, Aligoté is resourceful. In Moldova and Ukraine, it's like a really fantastic alternative to more expensive grapes, especially for making sparkling wine.
Oh, so it's not just about versatility, it's about value, too. That high acidity we were talking about, that must be perfect for bubbly wines.
Right, that natural zing, that's what gives sparkling wine its refreshing character. And in those regions, Aligoté lets winemakers make like delicious, affordable sparkling wines that can stand up to some of the big names.
Makes sense. But what about the U.S.? I know we have some pretty adventurous winemakers here. Are they trying out Aligoté at all?
Oh yeah, definitely. California and Oregon especially, they're becoming Aligoté hotspots. And each state brings its own like unique spin to this grape.
Really? What kind of differences are we talking about? I imagine California Aligoté is maybe a bit bolder, a bit more, well, Californian.
You're right on. California's climate, it's warmer, sunnier than Burgundy, so the wines tend to have a little more body and ripeness. The flavors are like a touch more lush, more fruit forward.
Yeah, I can see that. And maybe a hint of oak, just for that California flair.
Your California wines, some winemakers do play around with oak aging, which just adds another layer, right? Those toasty vanilla notes that California wine lovers, they love.
So we've got bolder, riper Aligoté in California. What about Oregon? I always think of Oregon and Pinot Noir. Does Aligoté fit in there?
It's true, Oregon is Pinot Noir country, and that cooler climate definitely influences the Aligoté style. Think of it as a sort of middle ground between Burgundy and California.
Interesting. So Oregon Aligoté is like more restrained, a little more maybe elegant?
Exactly. Oregonian Aligoté has a leaner profile, more minerality, those crisp citrus notes we talked about, and you might even find some like herbal or earthy hints, reflecting Oregon's own special terroir.
It's really amazing how this one grape can be so different depending on where it's grown. It's like a chameleon, adapting and reflecting its surroundings.
That's a great way to put it. Aligoté truly is an expression of terroir. It showcases those unique characteristics of each region.
Okay, so we've covered the magics of Aligoté, the history, the personality, its journey around the world. But I'm wondering, are there any specific examples of producers who are doing like really interesting things with this grape?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's a good reminder that while we've been talking about these different regions, there are individual winemakers within each area who are pushing the boundaries, crafting exceptional Aligoté wines.
Give me names. Who should I be looking for?
Well, since we started in Burgundy, let's go back there for a second. I want to spotlight a few producers who are really leading the charge with Aligoté. One that comes to mind right away is Domaine A&P de Villaine.
Wait, Domaine de Villaine, isn't that the estate behind Romanée Conti? One of the most expensive wines in the world?
You got it, and that's what makes their Aligoté so intriguing. It's from Bouzeron, and it really shows their belief in the potential of this often overlooked grape.
Wow, that's really something. So we're talking like serious winemaking royalty here. What's their style like? What can we expect from a Domaine de Villaine Aligoté?
Well, their Aligotés are known for this incredible balance and complexity. Plus, they can age. They're not your everyday supers. These are Aligotés that can evolve and develop over time, showcasing what the grape can really do.
So a special occasion bottle, for sure. Got it. Any other Burgundy superstars I should look out for?
Oh, definitely. Domaine Laflave is another name that comes to mind. They're known for their like super elegant expressions of Burgundy terroir. And their Aligoté, it doesn't disappoint.
I bet. It's probably a super refined, mineral-driven Aligoté. Pure elegance. Are there any producers who are like doing things differently? Experimenting with new techniques?
You read my mind. Domaine de Chassernet is really a pioneer when it comes to biodynamic viticulture, working with nature, minimizing any interference in the vineyard and the cellar. They're producing some really interesting Aligotés from Bouzeron. They really let the grape speak for itself.
Biodynamic Aligoté. Now that's something I need to try. It sounds like there's a real mix of styles and approaches to Aligoté and Burgundy. That's pretty cool.
It is, and that diversity just shows how dynamic this resurgence is. It's not just about, sticking to tradition. It's about exploring new possibilities while respecting the grape.
So we've got these Burgundy superstars, but what about those other regions? Eastern Europe, the U.S. Any specific producers there that are worth knowing about?
For sure. In Moldova, there's a producer called Chateau Varte that's doing great things with Aligoté. Still wines, sparkling wines, you name it. They're really showing off the grape's versatility.
Chateau Vartel. Okay, adding that to my list. What about the U.S.? Any standout Aligoté producers in California or Oregon?
In California, keep an eye out for Lioco. They're in Mendocino County, and they're known for their small batch terroir-driven wines. Their Aligoté is like bottled California sunshine with those ripe fruit flavors and a really nice texture.
Lioco. Got it. Oregon. Any names to drop there?
In Oregon, there's Division Winemaking Company. They're making waves with their Aligoté, sourcing grapes from all over the state. Their Aligoté is bright, crisp, and mineral-driven, a real Oregon wine.
Wow, I need to write all this down. So many new Aligoté producers to explore. But before we get carried away, I think it's important to remember that Aligoté isn't just about specific places or producers. It's really about the grape itself and this growing movement to really appreciate what makes it special.
Yeah, that's so important. Aligoté kind of represents this shift in the wine world, a move away from those big, bold, oaky wines that we saw so much of.
Yeah, it's like a return to freshness, a return to a more subtle kind of flavor, wouldn't you say?
Totally. And Aligoté fits perfectly with that. It's about, lightness and vibrancy and that sense of place.
Well said. And speaking of sense of place, I think we should delve deeper into that whole idea of terroir and how it connects to Aligoté. We'll explore that after a quick break. So stay with us. We're back and ready to continue our Aligoté adventure. When we left off, we were just about to uncover where this grape is making a name for itself outside of Burgundy.
Right. We've explored Aligoté's home turf, but now it's time to see how this grape's doing in other wine regions around the world.
Okay, give me the inside scoop. Where is Aligoté making a splash internationally?
Well, get this. Aligoté has actually found a welcoming home in Eastern Europe, Moldova and Ukraine, to be precise.
Really? Eastern Europe?
Yeah, they've really embraced this grape, making both still and sparkling wines.
I never would have guessed that. What's the story there?
It's pretty interesting. Aligoté's adaptability is a big part of its success in these regions. Remember we talked about it being a tough grape, handling all kinds of climates and soil types?
Yeah, I'm starting to think Aligoté is like the Bear Grylls of grapes, surviving no matter where it lands.
That's a great analogy. And just like Bear Grylls, Aligoté is resourceful. You see, in Moldova and Ukraine, it offers a great alternative to those more expensive grapes, especially when it comes to sparkling wine production.
Ah, so it's not just about versatility, it's about value, too. That high acidity we talked about must be a real plus for making bubbly wines.
Exactly. That zing, it's what gives sparkling wines their refreshing character. And in those regions, Aligoté lets winemakers make these delicious, affordable sparkling wines, ones that can really compete with some of the bigger names.
That makes a lot of sense. What about the U.S., though? I mean, we have some pretty adventurous winemakers here. Are they giving Aligoté a shot?
Oh, yeah, they are. California and Oregon, they're turning into real Aligoté hotspots, and each state brings something different to the table.
Oh, I'm curious about that. What kind of differences are we talking about? I'm picturing California Aligoté as, I don't know, maybe a bit bolder, a little more Californian.
You're spot on. California's climate is warmer, sunnier than Burgundy. So the Aligoté wines from there, they tend to have more body, more ripeness. Flavors are a bit more lush and fruit-forward.
Okay, I can see that. Maybe a touch of oak, too, for that classic California feel.
You really know your Calo in your new wines. Some winemakers do use oak aging, which adds another layer. You know, those toasty vanilla notes that people love.
So California Aligoté is bolder, riper. What about Oregon? I always think of Oregon Pinot Noir. Does Aligoté even fit into that picture?
It's true that Oregon is known for Pinot Noir, and in that cooler climate up there, it does influence the style of Aligoté. Think of it as a middle ground between Burgundy and California.
Interesting. So Oregon Aligoté may be a bit more restrained, a bit more elegant.
Yeah, exactly. Oregonian Aligoté has a leaner profile, lots of minerality, those crisp citrus notes. You might even find some herbal or earthy notes. It really reflects Oregon's terroir.
It's wild how this one grape can be so different depending on where it's grown. It's like it has this chameleon-like ability to adapt and reflect its surroundings.
That's such a good way to put it. Aligoté really is all about expressing the terroir. It shows off what's unique about each region.
Okay, so we've covered the basics of Aligoté, the history, the characteristics, where it's grown. But I'm wondering, what are some examples of people who are doing really interesting things with this grape?
That's a good question. And it's important to remember that even though we've been talking about these regions as a whole, there are specific winemakers within each area who are really pushing the boundaries and making some incredible Aligoté wines.
Okay, spill the beans. Who should I be on the lookout for?
Well, we started our journey in Burgundy, so let's go back there for a minute. There are a few producers that are really championing Aligoté. One that comes to mind immediately is Domaine A&P de Villaine.
Wait, Domaine de Villaine. Isn't that like the Romane Conti people, one of the most expensive wines in the world?
You got it. And that's what makes their Aligoté so interesting, right? It's from Bouzeron, and it really shows just how much they believe in this grape.
Wow, that's impressive. So we're talking serious winemaking here. What about their style? What can someone expect from a Domaine de Villaine Aligoté?
Their Aligotés, they're known for their balance and complexity, and they can age. They're not just simple, everyday drinking wines. These are ones that can evolve over time, showing what Aligoté can really do.
So not your everyday sipper, but definitely one to save for a special occasion. Got it. Any other big names in Burgundy I should be looking for?
Absolutely. Domaine La Flaife is another one that stands out. They're known for making these elegant, pure expressions of Burgundy's terroir, and their Aligoté, it's no exception.
I bet. I can just picture it. A refined, mineral-driven Aligoté. Pure elegance. But are there any producers who are maybe taking a different approach, like experimenting with different techniques?
You read my mind. Domine Chassorny, they're pioneers in biodynamic viticulture, working in harmony with nature and minimizing intervention in the vineyard and the cellar. They're making some really interesting Aligotés from Bouzeron. They really let the grape express itself.
Biodynamic Aligoté. Okay, that's definitely on my list to try. It sounds like there's a real diversity of styles and approaches to Aligoté in Burgundy.
Absolutely. And that diversity just shows how dynamic Aligoté's resurgence is. It's not just about sticking to tradition, it's about exploring new possibilities while respecting what the grape's all about.
So those are some of the stars in Burgundy, but what about those other regions we talked about? Eastern Europe and US, are there any producers there worth mentioning?
For sure. In Moldova, there's a producer called Chateau Varte that's making some really good Aligoté. They make still wines, sparkling wines. They're showing how versatile Aligoté can be.
Chateau Varte, I'll have to check them out. What about over here in the US? Any standout Aligoté producers in California or Oregon?
In California, there's Lioco. They're based in Mendocino County, and they're known for their small lot wines that really showcase the terroir. Their Aligoté is like a taste of California sunshine, ripe fruit flavors, and a lovely texture.
Lioco, okay. And what about Oregon? Any names to know up there?
In Oregon, there's Division Winemaking Company. They're making some waves with their Aligoté. They source grapes from different vineyards all over the state, so you get to taste the diversity of Oregon terroir. Their Aligoté is bright, crisp, mineral-driven, a really great example of what Oregon can do.
I am taking notes like crazy here. So many new Aligoté producers to discover. But before we move on, I think it's important to remember that Aligoté isn't just about specific regions or winemakers. It's about the grape itself and this growing movement to appreciate what makes it so special.
That's such a crucial point. Aligoté really represents a shift in the wine world, a move away from those big, bold, oaky wines that were so popular.
Yeah, it's like things are swinging back to freshness, to a more subtle kind of flavor.
Totally. And Aligoté fits right into that. It's about lightness, vibrancy, and that sense of place. Aligoté is all about terroir.
Well said. And speaking of terroir, I think we should really dive into that whole concept. How does it relate specifically to Aligoté? We'll get into that after a short break. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Aligoté. We've covered a lot of ground from its humble beginnings to its comeback story. But before we wrap things up, I really want to explore that word we keep coming back to, terroir.
Yeah, terroir is at the heart of what makes Aligoté so special. It's like the soul of the wine, that connected into a specific place.
It does sound kind of mystical, right? Break it down for me. What does terroir really mean?
Well, think of it as this tapestry, a tapestry woven from the land, the climate, the soil, even things like, sunshine and wind and the history of a place. All these elements, they come together to influence the way grapes grow, and that ultimately shapes the wine.
Okay, so it's not just about location, it's about the whole personality of the place. How does Aligoté express that terroir in a way that's unique?
Aligoté is really good at reflecting the little details of its surroundings. You know what I mean? It's not a grape that tries to mask the terroir. He doesn't need to. It lets the character of the land shine through.
So with Aligoté, you're tasting the place, not just the grape.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Are there specific examples of how terroir actually shows up in Aligoté wines?
For sure. Think about those Bouzeron wines I talked about. They're a great example. The soil there in Bouzeron, it gives the wines this like distinct minerality, almost a salty tang, which goes really well with those citrus notes.
It's like you're tasting that Burgundian hillside. Are there other places where Aligoté's expression of terroir is like really strong?
Definitely. Think back to the Oregonian Aligotés. They often have a leaner style, more restrained, that reflects the cooler climate and the volcanic soils there. You get floral notes, a little green apple, and sometimes this subtle earthiness that's like pure Oregon.
It's crazy how this one grape can tell so many different stories depending on where it's grown. It makes me want to travel the world just tasting all the different styles of Aligoté.
That's the beauty of wine, right? It's a passport to different cultures and terroirs, and Aligoté is a great way to experience that.
Okay, so we've talked about how Aligoté is delicious, it's versatile, it showcases terroir, but let's face it, it's still kind of an underdog compared to like Chardonnay and all the big names. Could it really hold its own?
I think the underdog thing is actually working in Aligoté's favor. People are tired of the same old thing. They want something with character, something different.
So Aligoté is riding that wave of like people wanting to discover something new.
Exactly. And remember all those trends we talked about, the focus on freshness and, terroir and sustainability. Aligoté checks all those boxes.
It's like it was made for this moment.
Totally. Aligoté is aligned with what people want today, and I think that's a big reason why it's having this resurgence.
Right, I'm sold Aligoté's got a bright future, but before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a few key takeaways. What are the most important things to remember about Aligoté?
I think the first thing is that Aligoté has its own unique personality. It's not trying to be something else. It's an original.
And it really expresses that terroir. It captures the essence of where it's grown.
Absolutely. It's like you can taste the soil, the sunshine, the history. Aligo takes you there.
And don't forget, it's so versatile. You can drink it young and fresh or age it. You can have still Aligoté, sparking Aligoté, even those cool macerated wines where the grape skins stay in contact with the juice longer.
It really is a grape for every occasion.
So true. Now, before we say goodbye, one last thought for everyone listening. Given Aligoté's, adaptability and the fact that people are so into these lesser-known grapes, where do you think we'll see Aligoté popping up next? Could it become a big thing in, like, unexpected parts of the world?
That's a great question. Maybe we'll see Aligoté taking off in places with similar climates and soils to Burgundy, like, other parts of Eastern Europe or even in the U.S.
It's exciting to think about, right? The future of Aligoté is wide open. It's a grape that makes you want to explore, discover new things. So to everyone out there, give Aligoté a try. You might be surprised by what you find.
Cheers to that.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those glasses full.